Welcome back to Ripping Puck. I'm Babs, joined by Rob Schremp. And I have to get right into it, Rob. Radko Gudas, knee on knee with Auston Matthews. How did you feel about that play?
I felt like it was a really careless play. I thought it was dangerous. I think he's got a pretty good history of this stuff. So this is somewhere where he walks a fine line, and he crossed that line last night. That's a superstar in the league. And just you can't just run at people's knees reckless and abandon. And that's what he did. So it was pretty gutless. And I think it was fairly stupid, to be honest with you, if I could speak candid about it.
Because that's not the way he should have, he should be playing the puck and the stick in that situation. Going for the guy's legs in there doesn't really seem to be like the play. And he's also several strides into that movement. Like, it's not charging, but it's a similar sense where you're looking at that and going, why did you bother doing that?
Yeah, it's just insane. Like I think, and if I put myself in that position, I would turn and go out, and I would think about stick on puck, body position. I wouldn't think of charging at that guy there. You know what I mean? Sometimes in the neutral zone, it's a different position because there's a lot of speed, gap controls, kind of finicky. But in that position in the offensive zone or D zone for Gudas, like I don't understand why he's charging at that guy like that.
Mhm.
And again, it was reckless abandon. He figured he would do it, and just, hey, what the hell? See what happens. And what happens is he goes knee on knee with, arguably one of the biggest superstars in the league. So whether it was a superstar or not, it doesn't matter. The play's bad either way, but it turns out it was a superstar. So there's obviously going to be a lot more scrutiny and a little bit like, what the fuck are you doing?
Mhm. And what did you think of the Leafs' response there? Because I know a bunch of guys had their heads turned the opposite direction, and then we're looking back like, hey, what just happened? But even then, after people realized, like, you can connect the dots pretty fast. But how did you feel about the response there?
I feel like it was kind of telling of where they're at as a team right now. I think when you're going on all cylinders as a team, as soon as that happens, people jump. It just doesn't even matter. I think the reaction right away was like people were like, "Hey, ref, it's a penalty." Again, when you're going on all cylinders and your team's in the right place, as a unit with the chemistry and with the bond of the team, the guys just go.
Mhm.
So I felt like the reaction was pretty telling of where they're at now as a team, how they sit. I mean, in the third, they did respond. I love seeing Cowan come out in the third with some piss and vinegar and stuff like that's great there. But in that moment, that tells me that everybody's a little bit sleepy at the moment. Because again, when you're going and you're on, you're activated. You see that, and even a guy like myself, I don't even think it's just you go right away.
Mhm.
When you're not on, you're just like, oh, well, we're good at power play, and you're not really, you don't have that razor edge competitiveness, and you're like, fuck that guy, you just hit my team, I'm gonna kill him.
Mhm.
You just kind of like, oh, like pretty much what we saw.
So Gudis leaves the game, obviously. So what's the response in the room? Because they're not going to be able to get their lick back on the guy that, did that, but they also can't repeat the same action. So how would the room decide, like, hey, how are they going to pay? Because they're not going to be playing Anaheim again, right? So, like, how do you deal with the situation? Because there has to be a consequence.
Well, that's the easiest thing would be as if he was in conference to get that retribution. Now it's a sort of a thing where it happened, and people like us are going to talk about it. Everybody's going to talk about how their response was. So the team's going to be under the gun now to sort of pick it up in that department of nobody messes with our guys. We stick up for each other. We band together as brothers. So it'd be interesting to see how they sort of react to that. That being said, I don't really see them as that kind of team that's going to come out now and go, you know what, let's play a little bit Broad Street bully hockey to
Mhm.
show the league that we're not to be messed with. But there's not really much you can do. I'm sure there's already been discussion about, hey, we can't let that happen. That being said, that doesn't really do anything.
Yeah.
If, I don't know where Auston Matthews sits today, but if he comes in a brace on his knee, everybody in the room doing a powwow about how we can't let that happen, it doesn't really fix that.
No, and it doesn't. And Austin, obviously, in this situation, like, there's nothing he can do to change. He's kind of defenseless while he's even playing the puck. Like, he's a fair target for a hit, but the knee on knee part of it just, it's almost lazy, is the way I would describe it. Gudas had to get up from a hit he had just thrown and try and, cover up a play and stuff like that. But Anaheim's a team that's kind of still in the mix here, right? And then you look at Toronto, who's very much not in the mix. Like, Anaheim's in a really good position to be in. And now with Gudas now taking himself out for probably at least 5 games. It won't be more than that, but I would assume they have to give him a 5-gamer on this one. It just kind of looks bad on all sides here. And Gudas is also a player who has a reputation in Toronto for doing whatever he wants without consequence, screaming in a goalie's face. Like I think this was a kind of just maybe a bit of a breaking point for some Leafs fans because they brought Ryan Reeves in years ago to resolve these types of issues. And then we saw them, dump out on Ryan last year, send him down to the AHL. And then, he ends up in San Jose this year. I just don't know where you go here. You see some of the other players who get mad, like William Nylander gets mad on the bench and yells at people. John Tavares, if someone hits him, he'll play harder. Max Domi's always back checking hard. There's never any criticism of those players in terms of like, hey, like how are you going to respond to this? People will take cheap shots at Nylander and Nylander will go score. But Nylander at the same time, you'll see him not back check. And it's a pain in the ass. I don't know where the team sits right now, but Easton Cowan has to go get in a fight. That's not an ideal situation. He's obviously trying to, stick up for himself. He got rocked around a few times in that game and then went and said, hey, like, that's not okay with me. But then you look at, the start of the game, Pizzetta comes in. He gets in a fight. He's been in the AHL the whole year long. I don't know how you have this type of energy just in each and every single game for Toronto with the group of guys they have, because you never see energy out of Auston Matthews.
Yeah, I think an energy is momentum. On a nightly basis, your energy as a group, what you bring, it's so important. Many teams that I played on that had success, like take it to whether it's junior with the London Knights, we'd have a Brandon Press go out the first shift and just rock somebody. Like we always brought energy. And the successful teams that I was ever on, there was that energy out of the gate and the momentum, and you kept it. And sometimes you start to lose it a little bit, and then the guys on the bench understand how to keep the momentum. I just don't feel like they're a momentum team. They kind of do the same thing over and over again, and some of it's super high skilled, and some nights when it clicks, it clicks. It's fun to watch, no doubt. But that being said, without understanding momentum and gaining momentum out of the gate, I don't know. They're really going to struggle. And I feel like that instant last night, it's like they're not ready for that. Again, when you're competing every second of the game, when something like that happens, you're ready. Like it's not like, oh, it's just kind of dozy at that moment. You're always ready. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to harp on it too much, but it's very telling. Like the first thing they did when that hit happened was they were like looking at the ref for a penalty. The teams that are, through thick and thin, they would have been charging over there, even if it was like on accident, even if it was like borderline Matthews' fault, they still would have rushed over there. So that's telling. And I don't know. I don't have the answer for a fix, but I think they just don't understand as a group what that means. How to, especially at home, how to get the building into the game, how to get the fans in the game, how to get the momentum. They try to do it too much through skill.
Mm-hmm. And that was a Dubas issue too, and he tried to fix that eventually when they realized they had zero grit and they weren't able to compete. And a game where the other team makes it dirty, Toronto a lot of the time would have to score 7 goals in order to win the game because they get bullied around otherwise. So it is a long-term problem from Dubas, and Treliving didn't do a great job this offseason. He had 2 glaring holes on the wing in his top 6, and he tried to replace them with players who weren't going to be able to necessarily do that. You bring in Michelli, who we didn't know what we were going to get with there, and then you bring in Easton Cowan after playing in the OHL. It's a big jump for him to make, and it takes time for a player of his age to develop. They really needed to bring in some other bodies, and it just simply hasn't worked. It's been a bit of a train wreck, but now they sit 5 points out of a spot where they could keep their first round pick. So Toronto's in a position where they need to be losing all of their games because they need to get a pick, and ideally probably bring in someone if they can maybe get some lottery luck. Like they really need some help in that department. As a group, do the players start to realize, hey, we need to tank? Like, is it something they think about, or do they want to win every game? Like, how do those conversations go in the locker room? Because it doesn't seem like there's a way for Toronto to really leave the regular season in a positive note. So what do they do? Do they say like, hey, yeah, we're done? Or how does that really work when you're on a team that's not going to be making the playoffs?
How does it actually work? It works out where everybody kind of looks after their own and keeps a job or gets a better salary, so to speak. Making sure they're, that's the thing. It's like when you're at this stage, what do you do? as an individual, as a team, what do you do? And that's where it gets to. I think they haven't really come together. It's not a good team. There's very good players, but that doesn't mean it's a good team. So at this point, what do you do? And a lot of times it's just, you have to look yourself in the mirror and make sure you show up and compete and take care of yourself in the sense of what you can do and making sure you're not, screwing the dog, so to speak. Mm-hmm. It's tough though, because it sucks. The writing's on the wall. And what do you like? You're not getting in playoffs. Do you think realistically there's a chance?
I mean, the Toronto has no chance. Right now, the only chance they have at something is a 13.4% chance of keeping their first overall pick. Is if the playoffs started today, they'd have a 13% chance because of the draft lottery. Now, that 5 points they have, that's a lot of points to be up on another team. You got to hope someone starts winning and you start losing to put them in a better position, because they only have $23 million in cap space this coming off season. And they've got 2 wingers they need to sign and a center. We don't know who might be coming back into the fold for Toronto, if Scott Laughton or even Bobby decides to go back to Toronto. But that either way is going to eat up a lot of cap space. But you have your entire D-core signed. You got all your goalies. You have a mixture of forwards who, you never question the effort of Steven Lorentz or Max Domi. You have guys on that team that were willing to work. Cale Yancroke is an example of a player who's maybe a little overpaid right now, but a guy who's been extremely dependable and does his role consistently. But they don't have consistent left wingers really that they can mix in with Auston Matthews. They can mix in with Nylander and Tavares, who haven't had a proper left winger in, 4 years now. They had Hyman, and Hyman letting him walk, was probably the biggest mistake they made as an organization. So there's definitely holes in this, and they're bringing guys up. They brought up Guru. That's a tougher name for me to say because it's spelt just in the worst French way, where you're just adding words or letters in that aren't there. But they brought in Giroux, and he's had success this year in the AHL especially. But when he played in the NHL, he had next to no points playing for Anaheim. So, he comes in. Pizzetta, a guy who played in the NHL, also did a similar thing. Not a lot of points. But Robbie, if you're one of those AHL guys coming up, are you trying to rock the boat and be like, hey, I'm just going to do a bunch of stuff as best I can. I'm going to try and show everything I've got? Or do you play it a little safer because you're not going to want to, say, have a neutral zone turnover or something like that? How do these AHL call-ups deal with the call-up near the end of the season?
Well, the smart way to go about it is just to be prepared to showcase your best game and who you want to be as a player. It takes a lot of willpower, and it takes a lot of mental strength to do that, because there's different variables. It's a very easy thing to say from the couch. Mm-hmm. And when you actually get into that situation, it's like you don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to, you don't want to piss off a Nylander or whatever, a vet. But that being said, you can find that sweet spot of coming up and showcasing who you are and what kind of player you want to be, and sprinkling an ingredient of also taking care of a sort of missing ingredient on the lineup, whatever that might be. So if you're maybe a little bit of a point guy, skill guy, call it, maybe you see the team doesn't hit much, going and getting a few, bang some bodies, that's going to get, Berube's attention. And then you still stick around with your skills and making plays, have the confidence to do that. Then what you're doing is you're showcasing for the other teams. Mm-hmm. You gotta realize that you have a, sort of a outside perspective that other people, the scouts are at all these games, right? There's NHL scouts are in every game. They're watching. There's at least one or two. Sometimes there's big numbers around the trade deadline. There's big numbers of people moving around watching games. So you're really highlighting and showcasing yourself for other teams as well. So, that's the thing. When things are sticky like this, sometimes maybe you don't want to stick around in that organization. Who knows?
Robbie, it's a fair point, because you look at some of the guys that Toronto's had in the AHL, and they've been known for developing AHL talent that then walks and goes somewhere else and becomes NHL talent, to a point where it became very frustrating. Or they're moving on from guys like Fraser Minton, who now is a very reliable player in Boston, who would have slotted now, with all the trades Toronto made, perfectly into this lineup. And you get stuck with Brandon Carlo, who, if healthy, and I don't know if they've actually fully had him healthy in Toronto at any point, it's an unfortunate scene for them. They don't get what everyone hoped they could get at the trade deadline. However, when you have everyone in the league basically willing to sell, and you have a giant pool of players, the value drops. That's basic economics, because the sellers well, they're trying to move on, and the buyers know that, so they're not going to get the return that they want. Tree Living waited and again, okay, these are the best I have. I'm just going to hit yes on these. I got to take them, even though it's not the draft picks that people wanted. They wanted 3 first-round picks. They get 1, a second, and maybe a conditional third. We'll see how that ends up playing out, but it's not what people wanted, and they're all frustrated and everything. But Tree's mistake this year was literally just not signing 2 NHL proven wingers. And I think you would have seen a different outlook for this team. I think guys also get frustrated when you're a top 6 player, but your winger is, say, a middle 6 guy, and you're really trying to improve year after year after year. And it's a rotating group. You had Michael Bunting on the first line for Toronto for the longest period of time. Clearly, that wasn't going to work and get them deep into the playoffs. Matthew Nyes develops with Marner and Matthews, and that worked for a bit, but then Marner wants to leave. But circling it all back, Pizzetta previously, yesterday to this game, says, with regards to playing in Toronto and Montreal, if you work as hard as you can and show that to the fans, a lot of people usually respect that and will lay off you. Do you feel like, if the pressure in Toronto is obviously a lot, but do you feel like the players sometimes are putting themselves in this position? And do you feel like that's a fair statement for him to make?
I think that's a fair statement. I mean, in any sort of market, like, and it's the NHL, like, you should want to be out there competing. That being said, I know we don't all have our best nights, but that being said, it shouldn't be from lack of effort and compete. And everybody knows when you're competing, when you're not, especially when you get a loyal fan base and a lot of season ticket holders that watch a lot of games. They know when you're, pulling the shoe or not trying. So what he's saying is, if you show up and give an effort, they'll back off, so to speak. I think just a little bit of the issue is that, I mean, everybody knows everything in that market, so there's different opinions all over the place, and I don't think it's very tough to block them out because it's so mainstream, right? Like, it's all over the whatever social media, it's all over the newspapers, it's all over the sports talk channels. So it's what people talk about. It's very hard to hide from. I guess you'd have to throw away your phone, never turn on the TV, never grab a newspaper, and you can live in your own world in Toronto. But with that being said, what he's saying too, it's like, that's kind of common sense that comes with it. Like, that's a non-negotiable. Again, if you're competing, like, I love, like, Cowan's great energy. He's great sandpaper for that club. He's young. He's going to learn his way. And but the way he's working his ass off. He makes some mistakes, but they're not from lack of effort. I haven't seen one lack of effort mistake from him so far from all the games I've watched, and haven't watched him in London and watch him progress to Toronto. Interested how that transition would go. I'm pleasantly surprised and happy for him in the way he's playing. But that being said, like, it goes to that. He competes. They're going to love him. He goes out and scraps last night. He'll do a lot of different things, and he's sort of a utility player. But he competes like a bastard every night. So that's something, again, that's where I think sometimes it does lack. You're watching the game and it's like, it's so ho-hum and lackadaisical, in my opinion.
Yep.
Almost too cool to care, almost too cool for school. Like, that's how it comes off, and hey, I could be wrong, but that's how it looks. And you watch these other, like, you watch Colorado, like, holy shit, those guys compete. McKinnon competes. That's a different compete. McDavid, those guys, it's a compete. And there's some guys in Toronto that have that. They're in that. There's, like, McDavid's on his own level, 100%. Him and McKinnon are, like, right there. But I give McDavid, like, I just think he's the best for sure. And right below him is McKinnon. And there's a box of players there that in this league that have that. And the only difference that separates them is the compete. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you're not getting that here. I'm sorry. That's just not there. Because, like, McKinnon is like a dog on a bone. Every shift he is so driven to attack that net, whether it's with his own skill set or whether it's, like, driving it back and then setting someone up. Like, it is every single shift compete. So, that stuff is non-negotiable, and that's the easiest stuff. That's the easy stuff. Working hard is, like, the easiest stuff.
Hey,
it doesn't take talent.
It doesn't take necessarily a rocket scientist to figure out some of the stuff that we've talked about. But I think in Toronto, I just think, like, the the highs are too high and the lows are too low, and the players kind of end up getting caught in that mix of the fan base where one week it's burn everything alive and fire the coach, and then the next week's, oh, we love the coach, or it's, oh, we need to trade Matthews, or, oh no, Matthews is the greatest player on earth. I think there's the highs are too high and the lows are too low. But you're coming off a high last night, senior hockey. You guys went in overtime, Robbie. But unfortunately, was that the first time you never got a point in a game since you started playing?
No, there's been a few games I've gone without, but last night I was a role player. I was utility, just playing a good, solid two-way game as the third line center. So it was a busy week of meetings. But yeah, our Strathroy Jets, we pulled out last night in overtime. We had to come back from behind, win. We're down 2-0 in the third, and we had a nice comeback, and Keating scored in overtime, so it was awesome. Good boy from Petrolia area. Yeah, it's been fun though. The playoffs are always good. It doesn't matter if you're in NHL, OHL, wherever you are, senior A hockey playoffs always, bring that excitement out, and you get chirped by fans and all this stuff. It's the energy is always exciting. So overtime winners are always a blast, and we got one last night, and we're back at it tonight for Game 3 in Alvinston. So we'll see how it goes. It's always a hostile barn there, and I had to tell my wife to leave the daughter home tonight because all the fans are yelling not the greatest things about Rob Schremp out there. So I don't really want her to listen to that. But, it's a lot of fun.
Will she chirp them back in the stands?
Oh yeah, yeah. She sticks up for her dad. So my general manager Mark Van Geffen came up. He's an awesome guy. But he came up, and my wife was in the concession stand line, and he just put his arm around her. And my daughter looks up and goes, "Hey, back off. She's married." He started dying laughing. But yeah, she's awesome. I love my little girl.
Robbie, so the senior hockey's heating up, obviously. I'm going to get out to a game. Unfortunately, can't get out there tonight. I have to go watch the Kitchener Rangers play the Owen Sound Attack in the OHL. OHL playoffs are starting to heat up, and one final question for you, Rob, is when you're in the OHL, you had a lot of success when you're getting ready for playoffs. Do the games in March start to, I don't want to say not mean as much when you know you're going to be going into the playoffs, but is it hard to get your perspective off stuff in the future for April Memorial Cup and stuff like that, or is it game after game, you guys don't get too far away from that? Because when you were in the OHL, it was, oh, they're a wagon, they're doing so well and everything like that. Is it hard to keep your eye on the very next game because you know what's coming quickly?
Not really. My time in London, like, we would always rest our dogs the last 2 games or 3 games of the year. Everybody's banged up by the end of the year. You play a ton of games coming down the stretch going into playoffs. So just that extra rest, and it was almost a fight to be one of those guys, because a lot of times it was the last trip was the Sioux. So, and it's just miserable. It's 8 hours, 9 hours. It's usually freezing cold up there. So, but as far as the hockey part of it goes, not really. We were we were always gearing up towards the playoffs all year long, my time in London. And it was always about that, like, getting ready for the playoffs, how we play on a nightly basis, and learning from our mistakes was getting ready for the playoffs. So the games in March they were very much prep. They were the dance rehearsal, so to speak. We were getting ready, and in my time here, we were always on a heater going into playoffs. So, and then when that puck drop happened in game 1 of the playoffs, it was, again, these teams that I played on here in London were just, it was so much fun because everybody was prepared, everybody was ready, everybody was hungry, and it was like that energy I talked about earlier in the show. Like, when the puck dropped, every guy was going to go do their part to get the energy and the momentum. And that doesn't mean every guy was going to try to do everything. Every guy was going to do their part. Again, Prusty would go run the shit out of a D. Pairs would come down and toe drag a D and either bury or go off the bar. You feel that momentum. And then we draw a penalty, first power play, boom, it's in the back of the net. Now we got the building on our side, and we got the other team like, oh shit, here they come again. Mm-hmm. And that's how we rolled. So it's a very infectious emotion and feeling, and it's addicting almost. And yeah, that's the time here was about that, and it was a hell of a ride.
Mm-hmm. I think the Toronto Maple Leafs could take a few notes from the London Knights, which is ironic given that, well, they've got a few London Knights on the team already. But if you enjoyed today's episode, me fumbling through my words on the outro, make sure to let us know in the comments, and we are going to be back next week.